Marcus, what was your reaction to Jordan Birch running downfield with that pick six?
I said he should be a tight end.
Which leads me to the next one. Any, mad scientist stuff about maybe getting him on offense?
I'm trying. He better be playing a lot of snaps over the next couple of weeks because I'm in coach's ear every single day. Like, that's the most natural run and catch I've seen in a long time.
Chris, I'm picturing Marcus Satterfield like at the football facility. Shane Beamer comes out of his office to go get lunch, and Satterfield just pops up behind him and starts whispering, Birch is a tight end. Birch is a tight end. Just popping up at all times. Maybe you have a little subconscious thing going on there. I don't know. But, dude, coordinator speaking today. By the way, welcome in. This is GC Live, brought to you by Clint Hammond of the Mortgage Network. Tell you a little bit more about Clint here in a second. But that was one of my favorite parts of today's coordinator media availabilities. One, as I've said multiple times now, I'll reiterate how much I love the fact that we are hearing from the coordinators and that they give us a little something, man. They're not going to ever give you like the game plan. You don't expect that. But you get information from every single one of these media availabilities from the coordinators. I love it. And Marcus Satterfield, if you're on the video version here, you saw his face when he was talking about Jordan Birch. I think he had the same thought as everyone else in that entire stadium, unless you were in Eastern Illinois Panther blue. And it was just like, holy, you know what? This kid can absolutely fly for his size.
I will disagree, Wes. Even the Eastern Illinois people were definitely thinking that. They were
probably right, but with a different emotion attached to it, I believe.
Yeah, that they were at first going, "Oh crap," and then it was, "Wow, that is a big man who is moving very fast," and it's not good. But yeah, I mean, it was, dude. I mean that play. By the way, Sherrod Golightly, former Gamecock from 2010 to 2014. I talked with him about that play as a part of our breakdown on GamecockCentral.com that we did of Clayton White's defense, scheme, technique, all that type of stuff, big play breakdown for game one. And Sherrod was like, I like seeing D linemen in the end zone. It reminds me of the old days. You know, he's talking about Melvin a little bit. He's talking about Jadeveon Clowney a little bit with how he could run, which we discussed the other day, Wes. But, yeah, I'm sure there's been plenty of joking in that football office, and there's obviously been a lot in the media setting, talking/joking about turning Jordan Birch into an offensive player. Mike Peterson probably does not think it's funny. Clayton White probably not all that high on that idea of stealing Jordan Birch. But man, do you remember? I think that was probably what Jordan's junior year, maybe going into his senior year at Hammond West, and seeing him playing receiver in 7-on-7 at Carolina's camp and just going, wow. You know, I mean, just there is zero doubt that Jordan Birch could be an NFL level tight end, first round pick type of talent at tight end. But what he could also be is a really, really, really good defensive player. And we're starting to see more of those signs, you know, popping up.
Yeah. I was trying to remember if it was going into sophomore year or going into junior year, because I remember this when we first saw him playing tight end at that 7-on-7. That was at the time he was Jordan Birch. He was not Jordan Birch. Like, it was before he was like 5-star. It was before just his recruitment became. Every couple of years around here, there's a recruitment that just sort of. And I'm talking about from the fan base's perspective. I mean, you remember how it was. Anything we posted about Jordan Birch, like, it was the topic of conversation in South Carolina, within the fan base. And so this was well before that. And I remember some guys on the South Carolina staff at the time were like, that guy's an NFL tight end. Like, he is an NFL tight end. But you sort of were already kind of like, yeah, but he's going to rush the passer. Like, that's kind of guys like that don't just get to play offense. That's just not the way it works. Now, I will say this, man. And I want to talk quite a bit about the offense and some stuff we have coming up on the site and some stuff from Satterfield, some observations. But I will say this, man, with Birch, with Jordan Strong, with JJ Nigbare. I mean, I was looking at the PFF grades, and it's like the top four grades for South Carolina, not just defensively. The top four grades, offense or defense, were guys playing either defensive end or defensive tackle. You had Birch first, which you get a pick six. That skyrockets your grade. But Birch, Strong, Enigbare, Zach Pickens in there as well. For at least one game, these guys have lived up to what we thought they were going to be. But man, I'm looking at Jordan Birch, who actually I think ended up playing the most snaps of any of those guys on defense, because he was one of the guys that was playing. There are a few guys, Chris, that it seemed like they were playing with the original group, sort of rotating in with the first team group, but then they were also still trying to get them a lot of playing time with kind of rotating in with the second kind of later in the game group as well. So Birch was in that sort of segment of people that were kind of playing in rotation on both ends of the game. But man, I was watching Strong, just the way he moves off the edge as well. We have not seen the rabbits, the NASCAR, I didn't notice it anyway. I don't think we saw that yet. I got to think at some point there's more of an effort to get some of those guys all on the field at the same time, because the athleticism there is just off the charts. That's the way upper echelon, SEC edge rusher, defensive end, whatever you want to call it. That's the way they're supposed to look.
Yeah, and I'm glad you said that about Strong. I wanted to bring him up the other day during the show, and he's not going to show up aside from on special teams. Didn't show up in the stat line as much, right? But he was extremely quick off the ball. A long kid. He looks really good physically because he's put on that weight. Common question we got in the offseason is he still quick? Is he still fast? Looks like it on the field. Dude, he whipped the offensive again, let's throw out, it's Eastern Illinois. Just watching how he moved, though, and the bend, the movement skills, the foot speed, he just knifed inside with a little pass rush move more than once. And so he's a guy that I think we'll continue hearing from. I noticed that too, Wes, about what you said with kind of pairing the ones and twos at times. There were times where maybe there were backups in at D tackle and they would throw Sterling and Enigbare back out there, to kind of mix and match those guys. I thought that was kind of interesting. And really, from top to bottom, even when they were getting into number 3 guys or TJ Sanders and Nick Barrett, true freshman defensive tackles, both got a little bit of run in this game. I thought everybody held up pretty well. Typically, even in a game like this where one team overmatches the other, normally when you get down the line on your depth chart, you start to see some drop off. And now there was some, right? But they held up well. So D-line certainly one of the bright spots. And I think numerous people have pointed that out. Players, coaches, they really set the tone, I think, the whole game.
Yeah, Boogie Huntley getting some run in there, as we expected. Of course, Tonka Hemingway with the second group at defensive tackle. So far, so good for those guys. By the way, I got to tell you about our good buddy Clint Hammond. He is our presenting sponsor right here on GC Live. You see his info right there on the screen if you're on the video version of the show, 803-771-6933. Or you can hit him up at 803-422-6797. NMLS number is 71597. Again, that's C Hammond at mortgagenetwork.com, or just go to clinthammond.com. Easiest way to get whatever info you need on Clint. And again, if you're in the market, you want to buy a new home, or you just want to see if there's some possibilities out there for you to save yourself and your family some money on a refinance, give Clint a shout. Promise you he'll help you through what can traditionally be a pretty daunting task. He'll make it easy, make it simple, and help you through it. But yeah, man, so I've been sort of going through that process of rewatching, and I'm kind of on that. I like to, if I'm at the game, Chris, I like to do an at-home, just sit down and watch the game and maybe make a few little notes as I go. And then I'll go back and do like one of those more daunting where you're just sort of like really trying to check out details of the game and I was trying to find what trends did we see that can we go in and like pull out what might actually be the start of a trend versus what was game one, what was like the fact that yes, they were gonna rotate a ton of guys, what was sort of more garbage time type stuff. And I'll tell you one thing that did catch my attention was the fact, and we talked about Greg Atkins and how he may want to rotate guys more than previous O-line coaches. He may get more guys in there. Did you notice that Jakai Moore and Vershawn Lee were in the game well before the like full-on rotating started to take place? I noticed live because I was in the press box, so the way South Carolina was going towards the north end zone, towards the student section, I noticed pretty instantly that Jakai Moore was in the game. It didn't catch my attention just because Jakai was like, blocking my vision of Vershawn Lee. I did not catch that Vershawn Lee was in there until I was rewatching the game, and I said, 53 is in as well. That was about midway through the second quarter that I first noticed those guys being in the game. I don't know. That's maybe your fourth, fifth drive of the game, I guess. But did you sort of do we take anything away from that? I take a little bit from that. I know Jakai is a guy that you and I have been pretty high on, Chris, ever since we rode up there and Jakai pulled the Penn State the flip of the double switch there, went South Carolina, Penn State, South Carolina, and about made us have a heart attack because we had driven seven and a half hours to be at his announcement. It's like, man, it's about to be a huge, tremendous waste of time. But we've always been high on Jakai. Jakai missed the spring, so there really wasn't that opportunity to hear, Jakai Moore is coming on, or, Jakai Moore is pushing at left tackle. There wasn't that opportunity. Now he's healthy. That's a position, left tackle, wasn't always solidified last year, in my opinion. Mm-hmm. It makes me wonder because, Chris, when they did that, the right side and the center position remained the same. This wasn't like some wholesale, we're going to give the second team line an opportunity. I'm wondering if that's maybe something to keep an eye on moving forward.
Yeah, for sure. And look, we haven't, or I haven't, I'll speak for myself, haven't heard for sure if it was in-game performance related or it was more of these guys deserve an opportunity to get out there and play early and let's get a good look at them. And honestly, that may have been it, Wes, because I think Shane Beamer addressed it right at some point after the game, maybe that Tuesday press conference, or maybe right after the game.
He addressed it right after
the game. Yeah. Saying that, it was just, they wanted to get another look or a look in game at those guys. And so Moore, like you said, a guy that we've been high on, interesting body type, has athleticism, very highly recruited guy. Vershawn Lee, not as highly recruited, but from that same area, of Virginia, and someone that, South Carolina started recruiting, the previous staff did when they found out when they were recruiting Jakai Moore, they kind of found Vershawn Lee up there. And he's quietly, Wes, been a guy that has already developed into what appears to be a pretty solid player, and someone that has experience now at tackle and at guard. And so that was an interesting move and probably is a storyline to watch because for most of the offseason, the preseason, Jalen Nichols was manning that left guard spot and Jazz, most of the first team reps, it seemed like at left tackle. But, after they go back and they've, graded the film and checked things out, be curious to see how they handle that. Or, is there movement there in terms of the starters? Do all of those guys continue to play? Or are we going to see like a true rotation of those guys, whether it's those spots or maybe some other positions?
Yeah, I mean, either way, whether it was in game or whether it was planned, I think that speaks highly about what those guys being Jakai Moore and Rashawn Lee, what those guys have been doing in practice leading into that game. Maybe even means a bit more if it was just that leading into practice, they felt like those positions were close and those guys deserve to play. I think that's a good sign for South Carolina and being able to build some depth along the offensive line. Because you got to remember, we've got to remember Jordan Rhodes was a guy I think we sort of pegged as being maybe that sixth guy, maybe that guy that is next in line on the offensive line. He obviously transferred out going to Ole Miss. So, that's something there where if these guys are coming on, that's probably a good sign for South Carolina. And, we'll see moving forward. I did think it was interesting on the offensive side, PFF, I'm not sitting here saying the PFF grades are the end-all, be-all by any means, but Jakai Moore, I believe, was the highest-graded offensive player for South Carolina. Now, those numbers, frankly, get skewed if you have limited snaps. And generally, if I do like a top 5 type thing or put something out for an article, I'll be like top 5 guys who had 15 snaps or more, top 5 guys who had 30 snaps. You don't want it to be skewed, but still, just it could have been that he went in, had 15 snaps and it was awful, which was obviously not the case. He looked like he held his own. So I think that would just be one of those things, not that anything is necessarily happening there, but something to keep a strong maybe eye for moving forward. Chris, you got an article coming out. I'll go ahead and tease where you sort of went through painstakingly, I would imagine, pretty much every single offensive formation in the game. As I was rewatching, man, you and I talked about this off the air a bit. There is a very noticeable Joe Brady vibe to this offense and the number of tight formations that they use. That's meaning essentially at one point everybody was going towards the spread, and that's where you get everybody as far apart as possible. This is more, let's tighten everybody up, but let's tighten them up, but still keep pass catchers on the field, not tighten it up like going goal line. It's more, let's tighten it up, but keep pass catchers on the field. In South Carolina's case, at LSU, it's probably more 3-4 wide receiver stuff. If you're looking at it from a Joe Brady standpoint, for South Carolina, it's probably more, keeping a Nick Muse and Jaheim Bell in there. But let's bunch everybody up and then use picks and crossing patterns, mesh concepts, and the fact that you're bunched up creates some of those natural picks, and then you can still spread out into the rest of the field as the play is developing, as opposed to really starting the play completely spread out. So that was a trend. I'm imagining, my eyeballs told me that was a trend. Were you getting the same thing as you were literally sort of going play by play as far as the formations go?
No doubt. And didn't get a final number, even though I've got it written in my notebook here where I could go through it as far as how many bunch formations Carolina used. I need to go through and grab that stat too as I finish off this piece that I'm working on. I was focused a little bit more on how many 2 tight end, 2 running back, 3 tight end sets did we see. But there is no doubt that when you look at how many tight formations Carolina used, there were a lot. And that's immediately where my mind went, what you said, Wes, the Joe Brady type of stuff. A lot of people think about that 2019 LSU offense, and they think about chucking the ball all over the place. True, they definitely did. But they did a lot of it out of those tight formations. And I actually asked Nick Jones, who's also former Gamecock wide receiver, who's also doing some analysis work for us this season on GamecockCentral.com, about some of these tight formations. And he just explained it as you mentioned, Wes, the rub routes, the pick routes. A lot of times you can get those in man coverage. It's meant, as Nick put it, to cause chaos. So defensive backs, when you see these tight formations, or you see a tight formation with a bunch of receivers, meaning 3 guys there, you're going to start immediately wondering how you play it. What happens if this guy goes here? You really have to communicate So sometimes you're getting guys running free. Other times you're getting guys that kind of pick. The Zaquandre White touchdown, Wes, where he caught that little pass in the flat, that was out of a tight formation. Josh Van ran a really good route. He outside released, kind of came back in. Both defenders kind of went with Josh, kind of a natural pick a little bit. And Zaquandre was open and then made a guy miss and scored. So we saw a bunch of those plays. We saw a bunch of them in the red zone. That was an area where Marcus Satterfield really went to those types of plays. So more comment on the tight end usage. In that, I'm kind of going to outline how South Carolina used Jaheim Bell. 2 tight end sets. There were a couple 2 running back sets, which may increase over the season, and some of the different formations that they used throughout the game.
That's an interesting observation, man, about more and more down near the goal line. But it makes sense because if you think about it, dude, you get down to the goal line. Most people know this. It starts contracting so much that it's not just about can my guy run away from somebody, can my guy just get open. I feel like in the goal line is that's when your OCs are like actually making their money. Like there's a reason why teams both defensively and offensively practice goal line, like practice red zone. If you want to sort of lump all that together as an actual like separate part of practice, because your plays have to be different down there because you don't have that aspect of like running off defenders all the way off because the end zone, the back of the end zone to be specific, basically acts as extra defenders for the defense. So I think finding a way to get guys open, that was not a complicated play by any means, but it was beautifully put together. And I think you look, that's one of those plays, Chris, where defensive coaches probably call it a pick and offensive coaches call it a rub because Josh Van very clearly was creating that contact purposefully, but doing it in a way that he wasn't just blocking the guy and getting a penalty, So there's purpose to that. And I think it helps with one thing I think we're going to see more of. I was just reading back over some Joe Brady, like content about Joe Brady and the use of running backs as pass catchers. And the use of running backs at times, Chris, I'm wondering if we're going to see some of this. Running routes that you normally see receivers run, like not just your typical little, flat routes, like quick out routes, stuff like that, but more truly involved in the passing game. That was obviously just a flat route, but we saw Zaquandre motion out of the backfield and then line up in the slot like a wide receiver and then created the rub. By doing that with a running back, if you have a running back that can catch the football, you're getting him, not only you're getting that natural pick, that rub, you're also getting him matched up a lot of times with a linebacker or a safety. So I think those are some things, we by no means did we see the entire offense, like the entire playbook on Saturday. I got a feeling because did you notice today when Satterfield reiterated again, he said our running backs are our best players. We're like not smart if we have those guys standing on the sidelines all the time. So
yeah,
how many more ways did they look to get these guys involved moving forward? I think is something that's going to be fun to watch play out.
It is. And we saw, a couple things on that, Wes, with the running backs and with some of these formations. For instance, we saw a couple plays. Somebody, I think it was Travis, three tight end sets on the second touchdown drive. Got those logged here. We saw another tight formation in the red zone on that drive. They had a bunch set down at the bottom of the screen if you're watching on TV. And all 3 of them were tight ends, right? And then on the second play, they went empty. It was still a tight set, but it was empty. It was just Zeb. And then you had the 3 tight ends on the right side. Then you had a receiver. And then you had actually a running back split out. So example of that for you. Another thing is we talked a lot about the concept before this first game of being able to have some guys that when you break the huddle, when you send the offensive personnel out there, you're not sure as a DC, as a defensive coordinator, where they may line up. And that can affect your calls. You may be able to check into some different things. You may make a call, defensively based on what you think they may do from what different things they've shown. But when you have a lot of different formations and usages out of the personnel that you send on the field, it can make it tougher for defensive coordinators and for the defensive players to process what's going on. For instance, we saw, Jaheim Bell is one of those key guys. He lined up out wide, in the slot, at fullback, on the line tight end, and offset tight end. So he probably lined up 5 or 6 different ways in the game. So on one play, he may come out there and he may be, lined up in the slot. The next play, he may go out there and play fullback, and so that affects defensively what you're calling. There are some guys that you send them out there and you say, that guy is a wide receiver. It doesn't really affect your call. A guy like Bell, and then as you pointed out, Wes, these running backs, if you utilize them in creative ways, that can cause some issues, and it can give you some matchup and some schematic advantages.
Yeah, so that'll be fun to watch it play out, man. See what do we see? What do we see that's new? This is an ECU front that it sounds like, Chris, kind of from a big picture standpoint, without getting into like the specifics about their scheme versus EIU scheme and all that stuff. Beamer, and then I think Satterfield referenced it as well, that the amount of just sort of movement that they like to utilize up front, and how that was something South Carolina, and if you're Eastern Illinois coming to this game last week, you probably felt like you had to do a lot of that. Like you're not just going to line up and say, we're going to get penetration against South Carolina. You're going to have to take chances. You have to bring pressure, which they did, and you're going to have to sort of just realize you're going to give up some big plays, but you're hoping you can create some negative plays. The staff, and I think it was sort of hit. We saw that it was sort of hit or miss for South Carolina's offensive line. Very well blocked, then not well blocked, as opposed to like just a steady, solid, just, no big plays, but no, mistakes either type thing. Well, if you're ECU, there's going to be very much that same approach this week, I would imagine. And you're going to have better players. Not that these are truly SEC players, Chris, but they're going to be better players by a pretty wide margin, I think, than what South Carolina saw this past week. So that can South Carolina better deal with that this week will be an interesting storyline for this game.
It will. And I think, Wes, hand in hand with that is the downfield passing game for South Carolina, I think, is going to have to be more of a factor against East Carolina, whether it's hitting some deep balls, hitting some balls past the sticks, just having some more success in the passing game. And look, part of that in the opener, there weren't tons of downfield deep shots. Some of that by design, some of it just kind of how it played out, right? South Carolina definitely also stuck with the run in the Eastern Illinois game. They ended up having 5.5 yards a carry, well over 200 yards. I mean, it was a good day, not as good as some people, myself included, probably envisioned. But it is going to have to be better. But I think there's a couple of things with that. Number one, when you look at the passing game, it's going to need to be better to open those things up. And I think number two, the offensive line is going to have to play a better game and a more disciplined game. Shane Beamer made a great point that I think everybody does need to remember is in the running game, if you're not having success in the running game, everybody's going to point at the O-line and say it stinks. I heard it in the stadium, I think, after the first series, right? A little early. But, go back and look at the tape of some of the running plays early. Some of it was, even Eastern Illinois overloading the box a little bit. Sometimes the backs aren't hitting the right hole. Marshawn Lloyd talked about that. Sometimes the perimeter blocking failed, whether it was receivers, whether it's tight ends. Some things to clean up there. So they do need to clean it up, right, in game 2. I think for South Carolina, what you feel good about having in your back pocket is your backs are good. Like you have some backs that can make guys miss, can run through guys, run through contact. If they can play better and playing disciplined, not jumping up, not jumping early with some of these movements, dealing with the movements, the slants, the different things they do up front, that'll be critical.
Yeah, man. So before we get rolling, I know we're probably got 100 other things to talk about. You want to tell everybody about some Dead Soxy socks?
Let's do it. So Dead Soxy is partnered with GamecockCentral.com this 2021 football season. You can check out all sorts of socks on deadsoxy.com. That's DEADSOXY.com. You can check out their college lines with the Spur socks. If you're on the live stream, you see them up there in the top left. Patriotic stuff. You can check out their athletic socks, their no-shows, their boardroom dress line. They have men's and women's socks, so they've got something for everybody. Go check them out right after the show. Deadsoxy.com, DEADSOXY. And since you're listening to GC Live here, they have given you guys and girls a promo code to get 25% off your order. Use the promo code COCKY on deadsoxy.com to get 25% off.
That is a fancy graphic that you put together there, Chris.
I appreciate that, sir.
What else on offense, man? Have we hit everything on offense? Seems like I'm missing something. They're asking about Rico Powers down here. Did Rico get in the game?
I don't think Rico did. I will go back and do the assistant thing and go back and look and double check our snap count. But I don't
think Rico played. If he played, he didn't play much at all. But then Rico got scout team player of the week for offense. So do we see Rico get an opportunity soon?
Did not play. Yeah.
Possibly so. I'll go back, Chris. This time last year, so actually, if we go literally back to this time last year, South Carolina was in preseason camp, getting ready for the start of the season because the season was delayed. And this time last year, Rico Powers was generating some buzz. He was the furthest along of the three freshman wide receivers at the time.
Yep.
So I don't know, something to watch there, something to watch with Amarian Brown. Does he get some more playing time? Can DeCarrion Joyner sort of just bounce back from, I'm sure was not, it probably just was not the day he envisioned for himself. He was arguably South Carolina's best wide receiver for all of preseason based on the things I was told. So can he bounce back and let that be just one game as opposed to a trend, for him? We'll see. There are things to look. I remember what I was going to go to. Topic of conversation today. The coordinators were asked this, and as I do a lot of times, I was listening to Preston and Pearson on the radio for their noon show. There's that old adage, old cliche, that you make your most progress from week 1 to week 2. And our loyal chatters there as well can weigh in on this, but I want your opinion, Chris. Do you think that's true? Or do you think that is something that's just been repeated over and over again? So it's like taken that it's true, but it's not really true.
I would say there's some level of truth. It's hard to actually test that because one way would be, okay, well, let's see if that's actually true. Let's go back and look at, what a given team may do in week 1 versus what they do in week 2. Well, there's all sorts of variables there. Health of the team, who you're playing. I mean, there could be all sorts of stuff. One thing we hear from coaches a lot of times it's after the first game if they lose their opener of the season. Well, we didn't see that all preseason. I didn't see that in camp. We didn't have these issues. Well, part of the problem, at least, is you played an opponent that was not yourself, and those issues were then exposed. So, that's an understandable thing to say because there's some truth in that. So I do think there's some truth in that notion that internally coaches do see improvement in their players. It's your first live action. There are things that you can go back and you can correct that maybe you get into that first game. There's jitters. There's all sorts of things. I mean, I look at what Marshawn Lloyd said. You look at a guy like Marshawn Lloyd, added layer because he had an injury, and this was his first college carry, and his first college carry after coming off a knee injury for a running back. But he said, hey, I had some pregame jitters. I had to get into it, so I think he said, second series, third series, whatever. He kind of got that out, and he played better, Wes, as the game went on. So if you kind of apply that and scale that up across the board, there are going to be guys that are going to play better. Now, that can be true for other teams too. And so maybe it's not as noticeable on the field, because other teams are also improving. But I certainly think there's some truth to that, and I think teams can improve throughout the course of a year too, from game 1 to game 12, they can get a lot better. Sometimes they get worse depending on the circumstances.
Yeah, well, and sometimes you get worse because of just, injuries. The season maybe goes bad and guys start, you hope not, but guys start quitting, lots of reasons why there. But I think, and the folks in the chat, I think are echoing what you're saying. Preston sort of said the same thing as well, Preston Thorne, and it was that, look, you've been playing against your own team. Like, you're going up against your teammates. You think and when I say you, I mean, in this case, a coach, you as a coach think you have a good idea of what you have. To Preston's point, he even said, maybe sometimes you're more hoping. It's like deep down in the deep recesses of your brain, you're going, I don't know if our guy can do this, but you're like, I hope when the lights come on, our guys got this, and then there will be some guys though that maybe they just haven't been tested in practice by someone on the level of who they're going to face on a game day. Like you said, jitters, maybe they've gotten used to their teammates' tendencies so they can sort of, play to those tendencies as opposed to having to play, to technical form, to what they're supposed to be doing. So, but then the beautiful thing, you get an opportunity to go correct it. You get an opportunity to see if it's fixable. And then if it's not fixable, at some point you make a decision. We're going to give the next guy an opportunity. That was always Spurrier's thing. He was not scared at all to say, look, you're on the bench now, you're getting your shot. And and sometimes it works out, and sometimes 2 games later, that original guy is right back out there because he was starting for a reason, and maybe you're just not very good at that position. But yeah, I mean, I think there's credence to it. I think maybe for South Carolina, if you don't play a great opponent, and this was part of their discussion as well, it maybe gets extended a little bit more into this coming week into week 3 as well, just because you're going to have this steady, like it's a nice step for, it couldn't have set up better for South Carolina, in my opinion, Chris. Play a pretty weak opponent. Now go play a team that is going to test you a little bit. There's going to be a little bit of adversity. Something's going to go wrong at some point in the game Saturday. And it's going to be on the road when you're not chilling in Columbia with everybody cheering for you. Everything's happy. Everybody's smiling. Beamer debut. You're going for 2. You're going for 4th downs. You're converting everything. Like, you're going to have to go earn this one, I think.
Yeah, you are. And then the other part of the other layer to this, Wes, is they may, if they go out and win this game, they'll have felt like they improved. Internally, they're not going to come out and say in a press conference if they lose to East Carolina, yeah, I think we got a lot better, from week 1 to week 2. No, you lost, right? But even if you feel like we did get better at some certain things, maybe some things went wrong, you ran into a better opponent. For South Carolina, they're going to go play ECU, and then they're going to turn around and play Georgia, right? So that's going to be a huge test, because you may be on this upward trend, and they may have gotten there, and then they're going to run into Georgia, which is going to be tough for anybody in the country, including the best teams right now in the country. Teams that are top 5, as we just found out with Clemson, are going to run into Georgia and have problems, right? So, but I agree with you, and this is I go back to what Marcus Satterfield said today in his press conference. He gave a very succinct answer. He just said, is this more of a test for your team? Will you know more about your team as far as its strengths and its weaknesses after you finish up this game with ECU? And he just said, yes, 100%. It was a very succinct answer. No additional context needed because, look, you talked about, I think you brought up the point originally, Wes, you're not going to learn a ton about the team playing Eastern Illinois unless something goes wrong. Then it's cause for alarm. If you do something really well against Eastern Illinois, it may be a strength this year. There's a good chance of it, but that doesn't mean it will when the competition steps up, and that really gets going this week. And it's evident that Shane Beamer, Marcus Satterfield, Clayton White, all the coaches, everybody involved with this program, they are very much cognizant of the fact that this is going to be a challenge, and they're echoing that to their players.
You mentioned the downfield passing game, Chris. I got to think that's something we're going to see quite a bit more of. I would think maybe even as soon as this week because it was such a point of emphasis this offseason. My guess is that this was a game where we saw them air it out on the second play of the game, like right off the bat. That was the ball that you could debate over and over on who's at fault, should it have been caught, whatever. That was really the only deep ball we saw by my recollection the entire game. So we know that's going to be a part of this offense. I think much like, he even said they wanted to get Joyner in at quarterback more. They wanted to get to more of that, but they were up big. They were getting other guys in, and sort of is what it is, right? Well, I think you had a lot of short fields because you had the interception, you had 2 blocked punts, the running game was working. You were able to sort of just get these smaller chunk plays where you're just grinding down the field. You didn't necessarily have to throw it deep, and I'm thinking it just sort of played out like that. My guess is that we don't look back 4 or 5 games from now and we're still saying, oh, they don't throw the ball down the field enough. That was a conversation we actually had quite a bit last year, I feel like, Chris. Why are they not trying to, spread the field? Why are they not trying to spread it vertically? I imagine, my guess is that we're going to see quite a bit more of that moving forward, but it's going to be up to some receivers to step up and prove they can go make those plays for South Carolina. And if they do, it's only going to open things up more for your running backs and then, of course, for your tight ends underneath as well.
Yeah, it's a huge key to this season. And so will it be more of a point of emphasis going forward? Yeah, because it needs to be. Just when you look at the opponents they're going to face from a play calling standpoint, where a lot of the teams you're going to face, you're not going to be able to impose your will as much. South Carolina certainly hopes that they can impose their will even against top competition when it comes to, say, running the football. That's something they're going to have to lean on. But they do have to stretch the field. And so from a play calling standpoint, that's something we'll see. That's a separate item, however, from how successful will it be. And that really, Wes, is the key within a lot of the games. And one of the bigger keys to the season, they're going to have to that deep ball to Jalen Brooks. You can easily survive that against Eastern Illinois, and South Carolina did against Texas A&M. Some of these other teams might not be as survivable. That's a play that you're going to have to call and a play you're going to have to execute in these games where the margin is much, much, much smaller.
Yeah, we got a question here from Chris on Facebook. He says, do you think the defense will be as aggressive as they were last week, this week against ECU? I think, Chris, what we saw, and Chris, did you watch Clayton White, the stream today?
Yeah.
I don't think there was as much from that. The thing about defense, you're going to talk personnel, I think, when defensive coaches talk. There's not as much scheme talk. There's not as much stuff about that. Anybody can look at the offense and just say in general what the offense called. Like, it was a run to the inside. It was a run to the outside. It was a deep pass. Defensively, how many people, and if you're watching the game live and you're watching 100 different things, man, how many people in the stadium could you quiz after, if you quizzed them after a play and be like, hey, what coverage were we in? How many people would be like, oh, yeah, we're in cover 3?
Yeah.
Even if you're watching for that stuff, it's hard to tell sometimes.
Sure.
Certainly live when you're watching the offense, watching the ball. So, I mean, was South Carolina aggressive to an extent defensively? I mean, they weren't passive. I mean, they ran to the football. They did bring extra rushers quite a bit. I wouldn't, as far as scheme standpoint, Eastern Illinois was far more aggressive than South Carolina, in my opinion, as far as what they were trying to do. Like, if you were to draw it up X's and O's wise. But I think, and Clayton White was talked about this today, Chris. You sort of have your scheme, like, and that's kind of, it's your scheme. Like, from week to week, you will make little tweaks. Mm-hmm. You may call different things. I feel like there's a little bit more variance from what you might see on the offensive side compared to defensively. For the most part, you're kind of going to run your defense, and that's going to be it.
Yeah, some, like you said, Wes, small variances. So maybe some new pressure packages each week. Maybe you do a little bit more zone versus a little bit more man each week. For example, I mean, from what I saw, and I studied more of the offense, which illustrates your point from last week, lots of man last week for South Carolina because, to be quite frank, the coaching staff probably felt even in game 1, they probably matched up pretty well with Eastern Illinois from a man-to-man standpoint. But we saw some pressure packages a lot. Sometimes when you would see Brad Johnson add to the pass rush or blitz, for instance, that's because the running back stayed in as a blocker. And so Brad Johnson would also then rush in and several times blew up the running back. And a lot of times man coverage behind that because South Carolina could get pressure with 4. So that's how you call the game. We did see some zone blitzes time to time. I noticed one in particular, J.J. Nigbari was a stand-up pass rusher. He kind of looped around to almost like a Mike linebacker position, and they sent a blitz. So we saw some different stuff like that. But Clayton White kind of joked about it the other day. He said, I've got several years of game film from Western Kentucky. I don't have anything to hide. And so to back up your point, Wes, it's kind of the scheme is what it is. Tweaks, differences here and there. But overall, we kind of know some of the things that South Carolina is going to do. It's going to be about, going and executing those things.
Anything else from the coordinator conferences, Chris, that we did not get to that you have to say or that you think we need to hit?
Well, I thought there was a funny moment with small thing, but Marcus Satterfield was asked kind of about his input on plays and said that the 2-point conversion, which he did not have input on, he said that was blocked better than any run play they ran all night. So he said it was beautiful. So that was just kind of a funnier moment. But that and the fact that Satterfield, talking about Doty's health, Luke Doty's health, didn't he use the term it was going to be close? I think he said, Wes, which, was cool to hear because it's honest, right? We all kind of know that Luke Doty has not been coasting into the ECU game where he's just going to be everything is completely hunky-dory from Monday on. We know that it's been a process and a progression, and you talked about it plenty this week that it could be. We don't know yet, unless you know something, Wes, that I don't. We don't know yet, how much, Luke Doty plays, although he's expected to play. So heard some honesty there from Marcus Satterfield on that, and another storyline that obviously we're going to continue to watch.
Yeah, that was the first time somebody's actually sort of said it like that versus like just the sort of more broad. We expect him, we fully expect him to play. That was more like, okay, this could be like a game. It might be a game time decision, not necessarily because you're holding out that little bit of edge for your opponent, but really just, hey, how does Luke Doty feel early Saturday morning? I don't know, man. We'll see. I think if you were handicapping it right now, I mean, I don't know if I could give an edge, but I would say the more it goes along, I think the closer it gets to Saturday without you feeling like, oh, Luke Doty is definitely 100%, the more the chances are that this could be like a Zeb Nolan starts, but Doty plays type situation. Although he did, the other part of that was Satterfield said they really pushed Doty in practice this week. So that means he probably was able to do quite a bit as far as game plan, getting in his reps, all that stuff. The question being moving forward, how does that thing respond tomorrow? Because when you're coming back from an injury, it's not always, in fact, many times, you can push it through for a day, for a practice. It's how does that thing respond? How does it feel after that the next day when you wake up? Is it truly better, or do you sort of have that little setback where you're like, man, this thing isn't quite where we thought it was? So that will be the thing to track moving forward for South Carolina. By the way, to Satterfield's point, that fake, the sort of gadget play there for the 2-point conversion, that thing was well designed, dude. Like lots of times, a gadget play like that, it seems like it's more just based on misdirection. It's a numbers play, like you're trying to get a numbers advantage over there. You're trying to catch them off guard. Did you notice there was actually yes, there was this sort of misdirection part of it in that most teams line up. They call it the swinging gate. Most teams line up like that. They check the numbers, and it's everybody in the stadium knows they're going to kick an extra point because then they shift and they kick it. Well, did you notice on the offensive line, it was like a power play. Like there was a pull, there was like a pin and pull element to it. I don't know if it was the tackle pin, the guard pulled, or the guard pinned and the center. Well, I guess the center wasn't. He wasn't the center on that play. The center was, your snapper. But you know what I'm saying. I don't know. I don't remember who was pulling and who was sort of pinning the guy in. But there was a power gap scheme element to that, and that's what really opened it up for Muse, because those guys are standing over there on the defense, and they're all of a sudden like, wait, what? But they weren't just getting blocked. You got a big dude pulling to ram you into the end zone, and then here comes Big Nick Muse. I mean, that thing was well designed, I think.
Yeah, and I think Jackson Turnitine ended up just kind of taking somebody and kind of pinning him out of the play, on the edge there. So it was well designed play, beautiful, as Marcus Satterfield put it. So that was an interesting one. I don't know. I wonder where, they say, play calling is just basically stealing stuff. I wonder, has that been run before? Has anybody seen that play before? I could not recall seeing it as far as that design, that execution. Was that a first? Has it been run before? That's the question.
I don't think it was the first. I think that play's probably been run before.
It's had to have been run. But at some point, every play has to be run for the first time. So, I don't know. Yeah.
How many people have run it to their tight end, to a guy who's from a personnel standpoint is a tight end? I have confidence that I've seen a version of that play be run. Now, whether that specific details were run, I'm sure, dude, Pete Limbo probably has a freaking stack, it's probably a novel like this of special teams gadget plays. And each year he's probably like, all right, which ones are we going to put in this year? Anyway. All right, y'all. That's going to do it. We'll be back tomorrow. Still working on an ECU guest, y'all. If y'all know of a really good ECU reporter, like newspaper guy, I'm actually working on maybe trying to get one of their radio guys. If anybody knows of one that's just really good at what they do that you've read getting ready for the game, drop us a message in the comments there, because we're working to make that happen. I really don't want to go this week without having one, so we'll try to find one. Anyway, that'll do it for Chris. I'm Wes. We'll see you all on Thursday.